The telegram trembled in Eleanor Lewis's hands as she sat alone in her empty classroom, the weight of the words sinking into her heart like lead. The school board's decision was final. An unmarried, pregnant schoolteacher had no place educating the children of Willow Creek, Arizona Territory, 1883. Eleanor pressed her palm against her barely visible pregnancy, hidden beneath the loose folds of her dress. 5 months along, she had managed to keep her secret until now. But someone had noticed, someone had talked, and now everything was crumbling around her. Miss Lewis. The school administrator, Mr. Peterson, appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of false sympathy. "I'll need your classroom cleared by week's end." "Where am I supposed to go?" Eleanor asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Peterson's lips tightened. "That's hardly the town's concern." "You've brought this upon yourself." After he left, Eleanor allowed a single tear to track down her cheek. Charles had promised to marry her, had sworn his love before leaving for a business venture in San Francisco. His last letter had come 3 months ago, followed by devastating news of a shipwreck off the California coast. No survivors. Now she was alone, carrying his child with no home, no job, and a reputation in tatters. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the open window from the schoolyard. Eleanor had loved being their teacher, had poured her heart into educating the 23 children of various ages who attended the one-room schoolhouse. But that was over now. Miss Lewis. A small voice broke through her thoughts. 10-year-old Mary Jenkins stood in the doorway, clutching a small bunch of wildflowers. "Pa says we ain't supposed to talk to you no more, but I wanted to say goodbye." Eleanor smiled through her tears and accepted the flowers. "Thank you, Mary. You be sure to keep reading those books we talked about." After the child left, Eleanor began packing her meager belongings. The small cottage behind the schoolhouse had been part of her compensation. She would lose that too. As dusk fell over the town, Eleanor walked the main street with her carpetbag in hand. The stares of townspeople burned into her back. She had saved some money, but not enough for a train ticket to anywhere that offered a real future. The stagecoach office was her last hope. Perhaps she could reach the next town, find temporary work there, but the next scheduled coach wouldn't arrive for 3 days. "Miss Lewis." A deep voice startled her. She turned to find Jackson Barrett, whose son Caleb was one of her students. Mr. Barrett was a widower who owned a small ranch several miles outside of town. He removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair and concerned blue eyes. "Mr. Barrett," she acknowledged, fighting the urge to hide her shame. "Heard what happened at the school," he said quietly. "It ain't right what they're doing." Eleanor swallowed hard. "It's done now." "Where you heading?" "I don't rightly know," she admitted. "Somewhere that doesn't know me, I suppose." Jackson Barrett shifted uncomfortably, then made a decision. "My boy Caleb can't stop talking about your lessons. Says you're the best teacher he's ever had. That boy hasn't been excited about much since his ma passed 2 years back." Eleanor didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded her thanks. "I've got a spare room at my ranch," he continued. "It ain't fancy, but it's yours if you need a place while you figure things out. No strings attached." Eleanor stiffened. "Mr. Barrett, I appreciate your kindness, but I can't accept. People would talk." "People already talk," he said flatly. "And my ranch is far enough from town that you won't have to hear it." Desperation warred with propriety in Eleanor's mind. She had nowhere else to go, no immediate prospects, and night was falling. "Just for a few days," she finally agreed. "Until the stagecoach comes." Jackson nodded and took her carpetbag, leading her to a wagon hitched outside the general store. "Caleb will be pleased. Boy's been moping around since he heard you were leaving." The ride to the Barrett ranch took nearly an hour, the wagon bumping along the rutted trail as the sun slipped behind the distant mountains. Eleanor studied Jackson Barrett from the corner of her eye. He was perhaps 35, with weathered skin from years working outdoors. His hands were calloused but gentle on the reins, and he spoke softly to the horses when they grew skittish at a passing jackrabbit. "It's not much," he said as they crested a small hill, revealing a modest ranch house with a barn and corral. A bunkhouse stood nearby for the 2 ranch hands he employed. 12-year-old Caleb burst from the house as they approached, his face lighting up when he recognized her. "Miss Lewis, are you coming to visit us?" Jackson climbed down from the wagon and helped Eleanor descend. "Miss Lewis needs a place to stay for a spell, son. She'll be using the spare room." Caleb's grin widened. "Does this mean you can help me with my reading every day now?" Eleanor couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. "I suppose it does for a little while at least." Inside, the house was simple but well kept. A main room served as kitchen, dining, and living area, with a cast-iron stove for cooking and heating. 3 doors led off this central space, 2 bedrooms and a small pantry. The furniture was handmade but sturdy, and though there were few decorative touches, the home felt warm and lived in. "My wife Sarah's room," Jackson said, opening one door. "Haven't changed much since she passed. Hope you'll be comfortable here." Eleanor stepped inside to find a clean, modest bedroom with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a small table with a mirror. A pressed flower hung in a frame on the wall, a memento of someone dearly missed. "Thank you, Mr. Barrett. This is very kind." "Jackson," he corrected. "If you're staying under my roof, might as well use my given name." That night, after a simple supper of beans, cornbread, and coffee, Eleanor sat with Caleb at the table, helping him with a difficult passage in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Jackson sat nearby in a rocking chair, whittling a small wooden horse, occasionally glancing up with quiet approval as his son sounded out challenging words. Later, when Caleb had gone to bed, Eleanor sat across from Jackson as he stoked the fire. "I won't impose on your hospitality for long," she said. "The stagecoach comes through in 3 days." Jackson looked up from the flames. "And where will you go?" Eleanor had no answer. She had family back east, but they had made it clear when she left for the west that she shouldn't expect to return. Teaching had been her salvation, her independence. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I can't stay here. It wouldn't be proper." Jackson nodded slowly. "Folks in town can be quick to judge, but out here we mind our own business. You could stay until—" His eyes flickered briefly to her midsection. "Until my situation becomes more obvious?" Eleanor finished for him, her cheeks burning. "Mr. Barrett Jackson, I appreciate your kindness more than I can say, but I can't hide forever." "No," he agreed. "But you can take time to make a proper plan. Winter's coming on, not a good time to be traveling in your condition." Eleanor considered his words. The stagecoach would take her to Prescott, but what then? She had enough money for perhaps a week in a boarding house. Finding work would be difficult in her condition, and the baby was due in early spring. "Perhaps until after Christmas," she conceded. "I can tutor Caleb, help around the house to earn my keep." Jackson nodded, seemingly satisfied with this arrangement. "Caleb needs the schooling, and truth be told, I could use the help." He hesitated, then added, "Been just the 2 of us since Sarah died of fever. Boy needs a woman's influence." Over the next week, Eleanor settled into a routine at the Barrett Ranch. She rose early each morning to help prepare breakfast before Jackson rode out to work the cattle with his 2 ranch hands. Mornings were spent tutoring Caleb, covering all the subjects he would have learned in school. The boy was bright and eager to learn, especially history and mathematics. Afternoons, Eleanor helped with household chores, mending clothes, baking bread, preserving the last of the fall garden harvest. The work kept her mind occupied, preventing her from dwelling on her uncertain future. On the 7th day, Eleanor was hanging laundry on the line when she noticed Jackson ride in earlier than usual, accompanied by his ranch hand Miguel. They were leading a wagon loaded with lumber. Curious, Eleanor approached as Jackson jumped down from his horse. "What's all this?" she asked, gesturing to the lumber. Jackson removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. "Figured Caleb's lessons might need proper space. Thought we could build a small schoolhouse here on the property." Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. "A schoolhouse for 1 student?" "Maybe not just one," Jackson replied. "There are 4 ranching families within riding distance who have been wanting proper schooling for their children. The town school is too far for daily travel. You mean, you want me to teach here? Jackson shrugged as if it were the most natural solution in the world. You need work. These children need learning. Seems straightforward to me. Eleanor felt hope rise in her chest for the first time in weeks. The parents won't object to. She gestured vaguely toward her condition. Already spoke to them, Jackson said. They care more about their children's education than town gossip. Besides, out here folks understand that life happens, and we help each other through the hard parts. That afternoon, Eleanor watched from the porch as Jackson and Miguel began marking out the foundation for a small building about 50 yards from the main house. Caleb darted around them excitedly, asking questions and offering to help. "Will it have real desks, Pa?" Eleanor heard him ask. "Proper desks and a chalkboard too," Jackson promised. "Miss Lewis deserves a proper place to teach." That evening, as they sat around the table eating rabbit stew, Eleanor finally asked the question that had been troubling her. "Why are you doing this, Jackson?" Taking in a stranger, building a schoolhouse, it's a great deal of expense and effort. Jackson considered her question while buttering a piece of cornbread. When Sarah died, this place felt empty. Caleb stopped smiling. I stopped seeing the point in much beyond keeping the ranch going. He met her gaze directly. Having you here, seeing Caleb excited about learning again, hearing someone else moving about the house, it feels right somehow. "But I'll be having a baby," Eleanor reminded him softly, conscious of Caleb listening, "a child born out of wedlock." "Every child deserves a chance," Jackson said firmly. "And every mother deserves respect, not scorn." Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat, touched by his simple, straightforward decency. As October gave way to November, the small schoolhouse took shape. Jackson and his men worked on it between their ranch duties, and 2 neighboring ranchers came to help with the roof raising. Eleanor sewed curtains for the windows from fabric bought in town and created a lesson plan for what would soon be 7 students ranging from 6 to 14 years old. Her pregnancy became more noticeable, but true to Jackson's word. The neighboring families who visited to discuss the school arrangements treated her with respect. Mrs. Martinez, whose 3 children would be attending, even brought a basket of baby clothes her youngest had outgrown. "Children are blessings," she told Eleanor, "no matter the circumstances." The first snow fell in late November, dusting the landscape white. Eleanor stood at the window of Sarah's room, her room now, watching the flakes drift down in the moonlight. The baby kicked vigorously, and she placed a hand on her swollen abdomen. "We'll be all right," she whispered to her unborn child. "Somehow we'll be all right." A soft knock at the door startled her. Jackson stood there holding a steaming mug. "Thought you might like some tea," he said. "Helps with sleep." "Thank you." She accepted the mug gratefully. "I was just thinking about how different things are from what I expected. 2 months ago, I thought my life was over." Jackson leaned against the doorframe. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. When Sarah died, I thought I'd never find joy again. Then one day, Caleb laughed at something, and I realized we would survive." Eleanor sipped her tea, appreciating his quiet understanding. "The schoolhouse is coming along beautifully. Should be finished by Christmas. Your students can start after the new year." "Our students," Eleanor corrected. "Caleb will be there too." Jackson smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his serious face. "Yes, our students." He bid her good night and turned to leave, but paused. "Eleanor, I'm glad you stayed." "So am I," she replied softly. As Christmas approached, Eleanor faced a dilemma. She wanted to get gifts for Jackson and Caleb, but had limited funds and no way to shop without them knowing. She finally confided in Miguel's wife, Rosa, who offered to pick up supplies in town. Eleanor spent evenings secretly knitting a scarf for Jackson and crafting a leather bookmark for Caleb, using scraps from the ranch. She also baked gingerbread cookies, a tradition from her childhood that filled the house with spicy warmth. On Christmas Eve, they gathered in the main room. Jackson had cut a small pine tree from the property, and Caleb had decorated it with paper stars and pine cones. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. In our family, Jackson explained, we open one gift on Christmas Eve and the rest in the morning. Caleb bounced excitedly. Can I go first, Pa? At Jackson's nod, the boy darted to the tree and returned with a crudely wrapped package for Eleanor. I made it myself, he said proudly as she carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a small wooden box with her initials carved on top. When she opened it, a sweet melody played a simple music box mechanism that Jackson must have ordered from the catalog. It's beautiful, Caleb, she said, genuinely touched. I'll treasure it always. Pa helped with the hinges, Caleb admitted, but I did all the carving. Next, Jackson handed Caleb a long, narrow package. The boy tore into it eagerly, revealing a fine fishing pole. Really, Pa, my own rod. Time you had your own, Jackson said. Come spring, we'll take a proper fishing trip to the creek. Eleanor presented her gifts next. Caleb was delighted with his bookmark, especially when he discovered she had burned his name into the leather using a heated needle. Jackson unwrapped his scarf slowly, running the soft wool between his fingers. You made this, for me, Eleanor nodded. I noticed your old one was fraying. I hope you like the color. It's perfect, he said, immediately wrapping it around his neck despite the warmth of the fire. Finally, Jackson handed Eleanor a small package. It's not much, he said almost shyly. Eleanor unwrapped it to find a silver locket on a delicate chain. When she opened it, she found it empty, waiting for memories to fill it. For the baby's picture, Jackson explained. And maybe one of you together. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. It was the most thoughtful gift she'd received in years. Thank you, she whispered, struggling to express the depth of her gratitude. Later, after Caleb had gone to bed vibrating with excitement for Christmas morning, Eleanor and Jackson sat by the fire drinking hot cider. I never expected to feel at home here, Eleanor admitted. When you offered me shelter, I thought it would be temporary, just until I found somewhere else to go. Jackson stared into the flames. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else, she confessed. But I know this arrangement can't last forever. Once the baby comes, why not? Jackson interrupted. Why can't it last? Eleanor sighed. Eventually, people will talk. They'll make assumptions about us, about you taking in a fallen woman. Jackson set down his mug with surprising force. Let them talk. I stopped caring what the town thinks when they turned their backs on Caleb and me after Sarah died. Only 3 families came to her funeral. His voice grew quiet. The neighbors out here, they were different. They brought food for weeks, helped with Caleb, made sure I didn't lose myself in grief. Eleanor nodded. They're good people. Yes, he agreed, and they've accepted you. That's all that matters to me. The schoolhouse was completed 2 days after Christmas, a simple one-room building with a stove for heat, 8 student desks, a teacher's desk, and a fine chalkboard ordered from the Mercantile in Prescott. Jackson had added thoughtful touches, shelves for books, hooks for coats, and large windows to let in natural light. Standing in the empty building, Eleanor felt a surge of purpose. This was her domain where she could continue the work she loved. What do you think? Jackson asked, watching her reaction closely. It's perfect, she breathed. I never thought I'd teach again. You're a born teacher, he said simply. Shouldn't be wasted. The first day of school in January brought 7 eager students to the Barrett Ranch schoolhouse. The children arrived on horseback, some riding double with older siblings. Eleanor greeted each one at the door, introducing herself and showing them to their assigned desks. Jackson had fashioned a small bell tower atop the schoolhouse, and at precisely 9 o'clock, Eleanor rang the bell to officially begin classes. Standing before her students, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Welcome, she said warmly. I'm Miss Lewis, and this is the beginning of our learning journey together. The winter days fell into a pleasant rhythm. School ran from 9 until 3, with Eleanor walking back and forth between the schoolhouse and the main house for lunch and at day's end. Her students were eager learners, and she found herself enjoying the challenge of teaching multiple grade levels simultaneously. In the evenings, Jackson often joined Caleb for lessons, sitting at the back of the schoolhouse working on his own reading skills. Eleanor discovered that, while he could read basic words needed for ranch business, complex text gave him difficulty. "Never had much schooling," he admitted when she gently inquired. "My pa needed me working the ranch from the time I was Caleb's age." Without making him feel self-conscious, Eleanor began leaving simple adult reading materials for him: newspaper articles, short stories, and eventually a copy of The Last of the Mohicans that he tackled with determination. As January turned to February, Eleanor's pregnancy advanced to its final stages. The baby was active, especially at night, making sleep difficult. One evening, unable to get comfortable, she wandered into the main room to find Jackson still awake, reading by lamplight. "Can't sleep?" he asked, closing his book. Eleanor shook her head, settling carefully into a chair. "Your grandchild-to-be seems to think my ribs make an excellent percussion instrument." Jackson smiled. "Caleb was the same way before he was born. Sarah used to say he was practicing riding broncos." Eleanor laughed, then winced as the baby delivered a particularly strong kick. "May I?" Jackson asked hesitantly, gesturing toward her abdomen. Eleanor nodded, and he knelt beside her chair, placing a large, gentle hand on her belly. The baby kicked against his palm, and his face lit with wonder. "Strong little one," he murmured, "going to be a handful." "I'm scared," Eleanor admitted suddenly. "Not just of the birth, but everything after, being a mother raising a child alone." Jackson looked up, his blue eyes serious in the lamplight. "You won't be alone, Eleanor." "Not if you don't want to be," the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Eleanor's heart raced as Jackson slowly rose, his hand lingering on hers. "I should let you rest," he said finally, stepping back. "School tomorrow." Eleanor nodded, suddenly unable to trust her voice. She watched him retreat to his bedroom, wondering at the feelings stirring within her. Feelings she'd believed had died with Charles. 3 days later, Eleanor awoke to sharp pain in her lower back. She'd been having practice contractions for weeks, but this felt different, more intense. She managed to dress herself and make it to the kitchen, where Jackson was already preparing breakfast. One look at her face and he set down the coffee pot. "Is it time?" Eleanor nodded, gripping the back of a chair as another contraction seized her. "I think so, but it's too early." The midwife said another 2 weeks at least. "Babies come when they're ready," Jackson said, taking charge with surprising calmness. "Caleb, ride over to the Martinez place and ask Rosa to come. She's helped with birthing before." The boy nodded solemnly and raced out the door without question. "Should I cancel school?" Eleanor asked between breaths, still thinking like a teacher. Jackson gave her an incredulous look. "Yes, Eleanor, you should definitely cancel school." His serious expression broke into a small smile. "I'll send Miguel to let the families know." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and waiting. Rosa arrived quickly, bringing clean linens and herbs for tea. She shooed Jackson and Caleb from the house, setting up the bedroom for birth with practiced efficiency. "First babies often take their time," she assured Eleanor. "We must be patient." But Eleanor's baby seemed determined to arrive quickly. By mid-afternoon, her labor had progressed significantly. Rosa positioned herself at the foot of the bed, giving calm instructions as Eleanor's body worked to bring new life into the world. "The head is coming," Rosa announced. "One more big push, Eleanor." With a final, tremendous effort, Eleanor felt her child slip from her body. The room filled with the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. "A boy," Rosa declared, wrapping the red-faced infant in a clean cloth. "A strong, healthy boy." Eleanor reached for her son with trembling arms. His face was scrunched in protest, tiny fists waving in the air. A wisp of dark hair clung to his damp head. Looking into his face, Eleanor felt overwhelming love wash through her. "Hello, William," she whispered, using the name she'd chosen months ago to honor her late father. "Welcome to the world." Rosa helped clean and settle both mother and child, then went to the door to call Jackson and Caleb in from their anxious waiting on the porch. They entered cautiously, Caleb peering around his father's legs to get a glimpse of the baby. "A boy," Eleanor told them. William Lewis. Jackson approached the bed slowly, his expression a mixture of awe and something else Eleanor couldn't quite name. He's perfect, he said softly. Caleb moved closer. He's awful small, Miss Lewis. Will he grow bigger? Eleanor laughed despite her exhaustion. Yes, Caleb, much bigger. Would you like to sit beside me and get a better look at him? The boy carefully climbed onto the bed, studying the newborn with intense curiosity. Can I touch him? Very gently, Eleanor guided Caleb's hand to stroke the baby's cheek. He's soft, Caleb marveled. Like Rosa's kittens. He looked up at his father. Pa, can we keep him? Jackson's face reddened. Caleb, William isn't a pet, he's Miss Lewis's son. But they're staying with us, right? The boy persisted. An awkward silence fell over the room. Rosa busied herself gathering the birthing linens, diplomatically excusing herself to wash them. Jackson cleared his throat. That's for Miss Lewis to decide, son, when she's ready. The days following William's birth were a haze of feedings, diaper changes, and brief periods of sleep for Eleanor. Jackson and Caleb tiptoeing around the house, trying not to disturb them. Rosa came daily to check on mother and baby, bringing nourishing soups and practical advice. School remained canceled, with Jackson riding to each family to deliver homework assignments Eleanor prepared from her bed. By the end of the first week, Eleanor felt strong enough to move to the main room for meals. William slept in a cradle Jackson had crafted years ago for Caleb, revealing yet another surprising skill. You made this? Eleanor asked, running her hand over the smooth wood. Jackson nodded. Started it the day Sarah told me she was expecting. Took me 3 months to get it right. It's beautiful craftsmanship, she said, noticing the subtle details, carved leaf patterns along the edges, perfectly balanced rockers. I'm glad it's being used again, he replied. Been sitting empty too long. As February turned to March, Eleanor gradually resumed teaching, bringing William with her to the schoolhouse. The students were fascinated by the baby, taking turns holding him during lunch breaks under Eleanor's watchful eye. One evening, as spring's first tentative warmth mellowed the air, Eleanor sat on the porch with William sleeping against her shoulder. Jackson joined her, settling into the adjacent rocking chair with a contented sigh. Good day, Eleanor asked. Productive, he answered. Caleb's getting skilled with the young calves. Boy has a gentle touch with animals. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and pink. Eleanor, Jackson began hesitantly, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. Her heart quickened. Over the past months, their friendship had deepened into something more, though neither had put words to the growing feelings between them. What is it? She prompted when he fell silent. Your arrangement here, he said finally. It was meant to be temporary, but it's been nearly 6 months now. I need to know what you're thinking about the future. Eleanor swallowed hard. Are you asking me to leave? No, the word burst from him with unexpected force. He moderated his tone. No, that's not what I'm asking at all. He took a deep breath. I'm asking if you might consider staying. Permanently? As your child's teacher, she asked, needing clarity. Jackson turned to face her fully. As my wife. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Jackson, let me finish, he said quietly. I know this isn't romantic poetry or fancy courting. I'm a simple man, Eleanor, but I care for you deeply. I care for William too. The three of you, William and Caleb, you've made this house a home again. Eleanor cradled William closer, emotions warring within her. You don't need to marry me out of obligation or pity. Pity? Jackson looked genuinely confused. Eleanor, there's not a trace of pity in what I feel for you. Admiration, respect, affection. Those things, yes, but never pity. And love, she whispered, hardly daring to ask. Jackson reached across the space between them to take her free hand. Yes, he said simply. Love too, though I wasn't sure I had the right to say it. Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, his large and weathered, hers smaller but equally strong in different ways. I never expected to find love again, she admitted. After Charles died, I thought that part of my life was over. And now, Eleanor met his gaze directly. Now I find myself falling in love with a rancher who built me a schoolhouse and welcomed my son as his own." Jackson's face broke into a rare, full smile that transformed his usually serious countenance. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," Eleanor confirmed, her own smile matching his. "But there's William to consider. He'll never know his real father." Jackson's expression grew solemn. "If you'll allow it, I'd be honored to raise William as my son, to give him my name." "You would do that. Take on another man's child." "He's your child," Jackson said simply. "That's enough for me to love him." William stirred against Eleanor's shoulder, making small, mewling sounds that signaled hunger. As she adjusted to feed him, Jackson respectfully averted his eyes, a gentleman's gesture that only endeared him to her further. "When would you want to marry?" she asked. "As soon as you're willing," Jackson replied. "Though we should do it properly with a preacher and witnesses, the neighbors would never forgive us if they missed the celebration." Eleanor laughed softly. "Spring seems a good time for new beginnings, perhaps when the wildflowers bloom." "April?" Jackson nodded. "It's decided then." Word of their engagement spread quickly through the small community of outlying ranches. The women immediately began planning, with Rosa taking charge of organizing a proper wedding feast. The men, not to be outdone, arranged to expand the Barrett house, adding a proper nursery for William and a larger kitchen for Eleanor. Caleb was ecstatic about the news. "Does this mean William will be my real brother?" he asked over breakfast. "It does," Eleanor confirmed. "And I'll be your stepmother if that's all right with you." Caleb considered this solemnly. "Will I still call you Miss Lewis at school?" Jackson and Eleanor exchanged amused glances. "Perhaps Mrs. Barrett would be more appropriate," she suggested. "And at home," the boy persisted. "Whatever feels right to you," Eleanor said gently. "You already had a mother who loved you very much. I would never try to replace her." Caleb nodded, processing this. "I think Ma would have liked you," he finally decided. "She always said Pa needed someone smart to keep him in line." Jackson choked on his coffee and Eleanor couldn't help but laugh. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Caleb agreed, returning to his breakfast with the matter settled in his mind. As April approached, Eleanor found herself busier than ever. Between teaching, caring for William, and preparing for the wedding, there were hardly enough hours in the day. Jackson insisted on handling the house expansion himself, working evenings and weekends with help from neighboring ranchers. One afternoon, Eleanor dismissed her students early to find Jackson in the schoolhouse, installing bookshelves along the back wall. "What's this?" she asked, William sleeping peacefully in the sling she wore across her chest. "Thought you could use a proper library," he explained. "Ordered some books from back east, educational ones for the students and some novels for you." Eleanor's heart swelled. It was these thoughtful gestures, these quiet ways he showed his care, that had won her heart. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing he understood the depth of her gratitude. Jackson set down his tools and approached her, gently touching William's dark hair before meeting her eyes. "I have something to ask you." "Yes. Would it be acceptable if I adopted William legally, after we're married, make him a Barrett in name as well as in heart?" Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "You would do that for him, for us, for all of us," Jackson confirmed. "I want us to be a proper family with no distinctions between our children." Eleanor stood on tiptoe to press a kiss to his cheek. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I would like that very much." Their wedding day dawned clear and mild, with wildflowers carpeting the hills around the ranch. The ceremony was held outdoors, with a circuit preacher performing the service under an arch Jackson had constructed and Eleanor had decorated with spring blossoms. Eleanor wore a simple cream-colored dress with blue ribbons, holding a bouquet of wildflowers tied with the same ribbon. William, now 3 months old, was held by Rosa, while Caleb stood proudly beside his father as best man. Nearly 40 people attended, neighboring ranchers and their families, including all of Eleanor's students. Even a few friendly faces from town made the journey, demonstrating that not everyone had shared the school board's harsh judgment. Do you, Jackson Barrett, take Eleanor Lewis to be your lawfully wedded wife? The preacher asked. I do, Jackson replied clearly, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. And do you, Eleanor Lewis, take Jackson Barrett to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Eleanor answered, her voice strong and certain. Then, by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Jackson leaned down and placed a gentle, respectful kiss on Eleanor's lips, their first kiss, saved for this moment. The assembled guests cheered, and Caleb whooped with delight. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns hung from trees. There was music from a neighbor's fiddle, dancing, and more food than Eleanor had seen in one place since coming west. William was passed from one admiring neighbor to another, thriving on the attention. As night fell, the last guests departed, leaving the new family alone. Caleb, exhausted from the excitement, fell asleep almost immediately. William, overtired from the stimulation, took longer to settle, but eventually succumbed in the cradle now permanently installed in the newly built nursery. Eleanor joined Jackson on the porch, where he sat contemplating the star-filled sky. What are you thinking, husband? She asked, savoring the new word on her tongue. He smiled, drawing her down beside him. I'm thinking about how life changes in unexpected ways. 2 years ago, I was barely surviving each day after Sarah's death. Then one day, a stubborn schoolteacher with nowhere to go arrived in my life. Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. And one day, a kind-hearted rancher offered shelter to a desperate woman carrying another man's child. Not just shelter, Jackson corrected gently. A home, a family. Yes, Eleanor agreed, looking up at the vast canopy of stars. A family. As summer approached, the Barrett ranch flourished. The cattle were healthy, the garden Eleanor had planted thrived, and the small schoolhouse maintained a steady enrollment of 8 students. William grew stronger daily, his personality emerging curious, determined, and quick to smile, especially at Caleb, whom he adored. Jackson formally adopted William, making him William Barrett legally and in every other way that mattered. Caleb took his role as big brother seriously, proudly showing William the ranch animals and making plans for all the things they would do together when the baby was older. One evening in late June, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table planning lessons for the fall term while Jackson reviewed cattle prices in the newspaper. William slept peacefully in his cradle nearby, and Caleb was finishing a book Eleanor had assigned. I've been thinking, Jackson said, setting aside his paper. The schoolhouse could use an addition. Eleanor looked up from her work. An addition? We only have 8 students. The Miller family is moving to the area next month. That's 3 more children and Mrs. Martinez mentioned her sister's family might come from Texas. That would be another 15 students. Eleanor's eyes widened. That's nearly a proper school. Jackson nodded. I was thinking we could add another room, hire a second teacher for the younger ones. You could focus on the older students. Eleanor considered this. It would allow for more focused instruction, but can we afford a second teacher's salary? The neighboring families have agreed to contribute. They see the value in proper education. Jackson hesitated. There's something else. What is it? I've been corresponding with the Territorial Education Office. They're establishing a school district that includes our area. If we meet certain standards, we could become an officially recognized school with government funding. Eleanor stared at him in amazement. Jackson Barrett, when did you arrange all this? He had the grace to look slightly abashed. Been working on it since winter. Wanted to surprise you once it was certain. This would make it a real school, Eleanor said, her mind racing with possibilities. With resources for the children, proper textbooks, maybe even a piano someday. Would that make you happy? Jackson asked, watching her closely. Yes, she admitted. Teaching is my calling, to build something permanent here, something that will serve generations of children. Her voice trailed off, overwhelmed by the prospect. Then we'll do it, Jackson said simply. Eleanor studied her husband's face, marveling at how this quiet, steadfast man had become the center of her world. "You've given me so much," she said softly. "We've built it together," he corrected gently. "The ranch, the school, our family, it's all of us, Eleanor, not just me." She reached across the table to take his hand. "When I arrived here, I had nothing but shame and fear. Now I have purpose, respect, and love." "I never expected to find all that again. Life has a way of surprising us," Jackson said, "when we least expect it." As if on cue, William stirred in his cradle, making the small noises that preceded waking. Eleanor rose to attend to him, lifting the baby into her arms. His dark eyes, so like his mother's, focused on her face with recognition and love. Jackson joined them, wrapping one arm around Eleanor while gently stroking William's cheek with his free hand. "Our son is growing strong," he observed proudly. "Our children," Eleanor corrected, glancing to where Caleb sat reading, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Both of them." By December, the expanded schoolhouse was completed, featuring 2 classrooms, a small library, and even a bell tower with a proper school bell ordered from St. Louis. The student population had indeed grown to 15, with more expected in the spring. The school had received provisional recognition from the territorial government, with a promise of funding for the coming year. Eleanor had hired a young woman from Prescott as assistant teacher, specializing in the education of the younger children. Winter brought heavy snow that year, blanketing the ranch in white. On Christmas morning, the Barrett family gathered around their tree, exchanging gifts and creating new traditions that honored both past and present. Eleanor received a silver bracelet from Jackson, inscribed with the words teacher, mother, wife, beloved. For Jackson, she had commissioned a pocket watch with a photograph of their family inside, all 4 of them, taken by a traveling photographer who had passed through in October. Caleb was thrilled with his new leather-bound journal and drawing pencils, while William, now 10 months old and crawling everywhere, was more interested in the colorful wooden blocks Jackson had carved for him than in the soft stuffed horse Eleanor had sewn. Later, as snow fell gently outside and the children napped, Eleanor and Jackson stood by the window, his arms encircling her from behind. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Eleanor leaned back against his solid strength. "Completely, though I have news that might change things a bit." She felt him tense slightly. "News?" Turning in his arms, Eleanor looked up at her husband's concerned face. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it yesterday when he was passing through. We'll have another addition to our family come summer." Jackson's expression transformed from concern to wonder. "A baby." "You're certain?" Eleanor nodded, smiling at his reaction. "Quite certain, about 3 months along already." Jackson's hand moved tentatively to her still flat abdomen. "Another child," he murmured, "our child." "Yes," she confirmed, "a brother or sister for Caleb and William." Jackson pulled her closer, resting his cheek against her hair. "When I built that schoolhouse for you, I never imagined how much more we would build together." "A school, a family, a future," Eleanor summarized. "Not bad for a disgraced schoolteacher with nowhere to go." "And a widower who couldn't see past his grief," Jackson added. "Until you arrived." Outside, snow continued to fall, wrapping their ranch in pristine white. Inside, warmth and love filled every corner of the home they had created together, a home built on compassion, respect, and the belief that every person deserves a second chance. In July of 1884, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Rose Barrett, honoring both Jackson's first wife and the neighbor who had become Eleanor's closest friend. The baby had Jackson's blue eyes and a dusting of dark hair like her mother's. The Barrett family was now complete. Caleb, 13 and growing tall, William, 15 months and taking his first determined steps, and newborn Sarah, binding them all together with her tiny presence. The school continued to flourish, eventually serving 22 students from the surrounding area. When the territorial government established a proper school district, they named Eleanor as superintendent, recognizing her dedication and innovative teaching methods. Jackson expanded the ranch operations, hiring additional hands and diversifying into horses as well as cattle. His reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spread throughout the territory. Occasionally, Eleanor would stand in the doorway of her schoolhouse, the building that had been Jackson's first gift to her, and marvel at how a single act of kindness had changed the course of so many lives. A pregnant teacher with nowhere to go, a single father trying to raise his son, and the unexpected love that had built not just a schoolhouse, but a home, a family, and a legacy that would endure for generations.